Now that we have understood what a first normal form is, let us move on to the second normal form. So there are only two rules for the second normal form. Number one is the table should be in the first normal form, and second is no partial dependency. Okay, before coming to the partial dependency, let's talk about the rule number one. Look at the table over here, the student table. Does it satisfy the first normal form rule? Yes. It's all of them have atomic values, and the column names are unique, and they all have the same data format and so forth. We know that all four of them, all four rules of the first normal form are satisfied. So now coming to the partial dependency. Let's see what partial dependency mean. Before we talk about partial dependency, let us first understand what is functional dependency. So, functional dependency means all columns are dependent on one key, which is the primary key. Okay, that's a little tricky there. Let's understand what is primary key here. Look at student ID. So that will be identified, as primary key because that is a unique identifier for all students at a university. So, because student ID 102 Digong Duterte will always belong to only Digong Duterte from Davao and nowhere else. So, and therefore that student ID 102 will always remain unique forever for that particular university. The same is true for 108, 200, 300, and 303. So that is going to be unique for forever. So, for example, when I was in college, my ID number was M929. That is a primary key in the database at the university because that is my ID number and it is uniquely assigned to me for forever. No one else in the history of the university I attended will have M929 as an ID number, nor will it happen ever in the future. So that is what it means by primary key. So coming back to functional dependency, it says all columns are dependent on one key, which is the primary key. So, in this case, student name, the attribute student name, Digong Duterte, has to be dependent on student ID. It cannot be on its own. The same thing with the student address for let's say, Davao. Davao, it belongs to student ID number 102. It cannot be a standalone, and therefore we say that STD name, student name, and student address are functional dependency. Or we say attributes student name and attributes student address are functionally dependent on attribute student ID, which is the primary key of this table student. Coming back to partial dependency. Okay, let me explain. Sometimes there are two or more primary keys in one table. So, and within that table, there may be some attributes which are not primary keys that are dependent on only a part of a primary key. Now that's a lot. Let me explain. Look at the grades table very carefully. You should know that every semester the registrar's office maintained a grade sheet for all the grades that are submitted to the office, for all the courses the students enrolled for at a university or at an institution. So you should know that. Student ID attribute is included in the grade sheet because to find out which student's grade it is, and the course number attribute is for which course the grade is. See, if you look at the grade ID, that makes for a good primary key. But actually, student ID plus course number makes a good, both together can become primary key. Okay? This combination is necessary to make it a primary key. Let me explain. For example, if I ask you, can you please get me the grade for student ID 102? Well, you will ask me for which course number, and therefore student ID 102 cannot be a unique identifier for a particular grade. It has to include course number. And if I ask you, give me the grade for SE 101, but you will not know for which student. You will ask me, for which student? And therefore, the combination of student ID and course number can only uniquely identify a particular grade. And therefore, both the combination needs to become primary keys. Or in other words, we need the student ID plus the course number to act as primary keys to uniquely identify as a particular row in a data set. So, this is how I will identify a particular row in a data set. I will say student ID 102 for the course CS231 has a grade of B+, and the teacher is Dr. G. So, now, with the student ID plus the course number combination can uniquely identify a particular grade, or in other words, a particular record in a data set. And therefore, this is a situation whereby two keys form a primary key. But now let's look at what is partial dependency. Now, look at the grades table again. Look at the instructor column, the attribute name, and look at the, let's say, Dr. M. Dr. M is the instructor for SE101 and does not have anything to do with student ID 102. The same thing with Dr. G. Dr. G is an instructor for CS231 and does not have anything to do with student ID 102. And therefore, instructor name in this table is dependent on only course number. It has no connection to the student ID. And therefore, we can say that instructor name attribute has a partial dependency, which is on the course number. But for grade, it is not partial dependency because for grade, to identify a particular grade, we need both the student ID and the course number combined. And I hope now partial dependency is clear. And this partial dependency should not exist in a second normal form. So that means instructor name attributes dependency, the partial dependency on course number, should be eliminated. And when we do that, we can say that the table is in a second normal form. So let's try. So our objective here is to remove the instructor name attribute from the grades table. Solution number 1. Move the instructor attribute to course table. So in this way, we have attained second normal form. And we have another solution, so you have two choices actually. So the other solution is to create a completely new table for instructor, whereby you save the name of the instructor and the instructor ID and so forth. You can even actually save the phone number, their addresses, and so on. Okay? So this form is also a second normal form.